Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily. I graduated from Mount Mary in 2017, and I currently work in the alumni office alongside Carrie Schrader, who is the Director of Alumni Relations. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Shelly Dretzka, who she is a 1995 grad and has over 25 years of HR experience and is the mother of 2 boys. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Shelly.
So as Emily said, I'm Shelly Dretzka, class of 1995. So when she said 2017, I was like, "Ooh, you're a baby." So it's all good. So yes, I'm the mother of a 21-year-old who is a junior at Whitewater and an 18-year-old who is a senior at McWanago High School and going off to college. I always joke, I went to Mount Mary. I know there was some benefits there for tuition, and I go and have 2 boys. But so it's all good. So I give back in my own way. So 25 years plus, I check that box now in my life. And HR, human resources, all kinds of really cool stuff. So I wanted to share with you guys today what I do and why I do it. And then we'll dive into behavioral interviewing, which is super fun stuff. So after all my years in the corporate world, I actually, oh, there we go. There's the agenda. Perfect. So let's start with the introduction, shall we? So after all my years in the corporate world, I found my entrepreneurial spirit, and that really gifts me with the opportunity to work with small business owners to help them grow and succeed without an actual HR person on their staff. I become their HR consultant. I mentioned my family, very important to me. My life motto is really the 4 F's. It's faith, family, friends, and football is my world. So being a consultant gives me the flexibility to spend that extra time with my family. And as my youngest goes off to play football in college, we're going to be able to follow him all around the Midwest for the next 4 to 5 years. So quick disclaimer in my introduction. So all of this is just my opinion. HR, we really, it's not black and white. We really live in gray in the HR world. So all organizations should really partner with their own trusted partners and advisors and resources to determine which recruiting and hiring strategies work best for them. As with all of my speaking engagements and workshops, I highly encourage interaction. So please participate and share along the way. Emily will be watching the chats. If you guys know you've got those little emoji things, if you've got to raise your hand or give me a clap or show me some love or whatever that is, I appreciate that as well. We can all learn from each other. So I'm coming in as your HR expert, but I'm sure everybody, you've all been a candidate, right? Or maybe a hiring manager. You all have your own experiences as well. So let's start off. Oh, wait, actually, yeah, I'm going to start off with, I kind of want to see where you guys are coming from. So in the chat, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it with this agenda up, but if you are currently in a role where you would be a hiring manager and you need to ask behavioral questions, could you pop HM into the chat? All right, I got Britt and Beth, Mary Beth and Camille. Ooh, it is, I can see it. Awesome. All right. If you are on the flip side of that and you are a potential candidate and you need to know how to answer these questions, pop a C in the chat. Hey, Rachel, Thomas, Paige. Cool. And then as always, there's the other, right? If you're just here and you're along for the ride and you're just going to join us and have fun today, pop an O in the chat. Hey, Jessica. Camille. And therapy Zoom. All right. Oh, I love it. I think Thomas was a C and an O. Hey, Paige. All right. I got a fellow HR in the house. Sweet. She'll probably have a story to share. All right. Awesome. That's, I kind of know we got a really good mix going on here. So as I said, I graduated in 1995. So we're going to go back in time a little bit. So May of 1995, I crossed my stage with my behavioral science and communication degree, get married in September, and then start to look for my full-time job. So here I am, fresh-faced 22-year-old going out into the world, right? And I go for my first interview, and it's downtown at this really cool merger and acquisition firm. I had no idea what that meant back then, but whatever, it was a cool opportunity. So here I go. I go in for my interview, and in nice terms, it was a mature, hey, Mayman, that's awesome. go into this interview with this mature gentleman who's the owner of this merger and acquisition firm. He looks down at my resume and he sees Mount Mary College at the time. He's like, oh, that's a college. That's a Catholic college. So you must be a really good Catholic girl and you're going to want to have a lot of babies. So here I am at 22 years old going, I'm not even in HR. And I'm like, this seems pretty inappropriate. So I just kind of turned it instead of, slapping him or saying, okay, this is time to learn how to do proper interviews. I'm like, actually, believe it or not everyone that goes to Mount Mary is Catholic. And I just totally switched it on him and got through that. I actually did accept the job. It was a short term, but it was your first, my first job out of college. So it happens. And believe it or not, even though that is almost 26 years ago, those questions are still occurring today. So this is why I would love, if you guys want to pop off mute or raise a hand, I would love to hear some crazy interview questions that you guys have heard in your experience of looking for a job. Anybody have a good one to share?
I don't have a question. I think when I interviewed for a job once, the person kept asking me 5 questions, and when I did, her answer was always, you know what I'm saying, et cetera, et cetera. Like, she never told me the answer.
That would be a bad answer, right? All right, I see. If you were an animal, what would you be? Interesting. Wonder where they were going with that. Okay. Anybody else got?
Interviewing for my first job, and I kept getting the "you look so young," comments about how old I look, and it was like, it doesn't really matter, and it shouldn't, and you really shouldn't make comments like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. It happens on both ends of that. They're going to say you look young. On the opposite, they may not say you look old, but then there's age discrimination. So yeah, that's very interesting. Anybody else interesting?
Just to speak to the, if you were an animal, what would it be? I really couldn't figure out the direction that she was going with that as well. It's like, how do you put a, round manhole cover into a square hole type of a question. They just want to know what you're thinking. And, and it's sort of like what flashes through your mind. And it was like, well, I'd like to be in my mind. I was like, I'd like to be an eagle and be on the top of the food chain. That's one that flashed through my mind in that moment of thought. And I actually answered it and I said, I think I'd like to be a duck. She's like, a duck. I said, yes, a duck. Because I'd look all calm and cool on top. The water would run off my back, but I'd be paddling like heck underneath.
That's a great analogy. I love it. Yeah, sometimes it's just like, where are these questions coming from? So here's some other ones I've heard. I've heard kind of similar to the animal, but tree. If you were a tree, which one would you be? And how many windows are there in New York City? I've heard that was asked of engineers, and they wanted to just kind of see how their mind worked with it. And I'm like, I'm super not an engineer. I'd be like Googling how many windows are there. So that's my reason. I'd be resourceful and I'd use Google and find out how many windows are in New York City. Okay, well, awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. So let's talk about behavioral interviewing, because those are all questions we don't want to hear. When we talk about what is behavioral interviewing, really the big part of that is it's just one tool in your hiring toolkit. You should also be using reference checks, maybe some assessment tools. If you guys have been familiar, maybe you've taken the DISC, D-I-S-C in the past. Maybe you've done a predictive index or a culture index that kind of is judging our motivation and our work style. So really, when we talk about the interviewing process, it should just be one part of the tool. It shouldn't be the end all or the pass fail. So what it really is, the definition of a behavioral interview, it's a popular technique that employers use to assess job candidates based on past behavior. So job candidates are asked to give examples of how they've handled work-related challenges or situations in the past. Good questions usually can be customized based on the requirements or the competencies needed for the actual job. Or you can use those assessments that I talked about, because usually you do the assessments prior to interview, and then it helps you choose better questions to ask. Some assessments that I've seen is the emotional intelligence. If you guys are familiar with that, it's also known as EQ. So sometimes when you're running through that assessment, it may bring forward some questions and some rabbit holes you kind of want to go down in the interviewing process. During that, usually the interviewers are usually trained to watch for star in the answer. So if you're on the other side and you're answering these questions, they're looking for situation, task, action, and results. So when you're on the other end of that and they're asking that question, again, that's star, situation, task, action, and result. And really at the end of the day, behavioral interviews is just really a great conversation. You don't have that back and forth of, tell me this, can you do this? So that's really what behavioral interviewing is in a nutshell. So obviously I want to tell you the advantages. Why do we use those? So many employers feel these interviews are really the best way to find your successful candidates by learning a lot from what the candidates have already done. Okay, so we're looking at facts versus opinion. We really want the facts, and we want reality versus hypothetical. I'm sure you've all been in those situations where they're like, what if this happened? What would you do? Anybody can come up, and if you're a really great interviewee, you're going to come up with those answers. I will tell you though, there are some times where as a candidate, they may ask you a specific question, like, tell me a time that this happened to you. And if it didn't, you just need to be honest and say, well, that's never happened in my past, but if it would, then it can actually turn into a hypothetical of what you would do in that situation. A couple of other benefits of the interviewing, I'd say from a hiring manager perspective, you're screening for skill versus, I always talk about the professional interviewee, or in more crass terms, the BSer. Okay, so when we are doing interviewing in the HR world, I'm really not looking for somebody who is an awesome interviewee. I'm looking for somebody who is going to perform well in this job and be successful. So once you go through those steps of doing behavioral interviews, I always love the tip, and I always give this to my small business owners when they're doing interviewing, is when you're asking those questions, you don't always have to accept that first answer. You always want more and more detail. So my big tip is always use the statement, tell me more. Okay. So, and then on the candidate side, be prepared for that. So if you think you have that answer, oh, this is what I did, in that situation, a good interviewer is going to come back to you and say, well, tell me a little bit more about that. So you need to be really ready with some good examples. And depending on the role, sometimes, they're looking for numbers, they're looking for statistics, they're looking for the resources that you use. So that's what you're going to be prepared. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the best practices section. And from a candidate, it's giving you your opportunity to really shine. You're not just saying, oh yeah, I can do that. You're sharing your communication skills, your resources. You get to clarify your true experience and your qualifications, and really your successes. That is your time to shine. It is when you are a salesperson. So that comes in your preparedness. And again, on the hiring manager side or on the company side, I do always warn, I'm like, when you have the candidate in front of you, you are seeing them at their best. This is it. So if there's some red flags or something you don't like there, you better figure that out in the candidate arena. So anybody in this group have any experiences with behavioral interviews and want to share if you've been asked a good question or what it looked like? And that's okay if we don't. Okay. All right. So let's talk about best practices. So, oh, and by the way, at the end of all this, that resources part that's on the agenda, Emily's going to send you guys a nice little email with all those links and things. So don't worry about like writing it down. But one of my really good resources on here is actually, I didn't get to add because I found it later as I was working on my presentation. So it is the 9 most common behavioral interview questions with the answers. Okay. So if you kind of have maybe a lazy HR person out there who's going and just finding their questions, you've now found their gold mine and what looks good for that. So that link will be handed out to you. So I kind of wanted to walk through some of these. It's really great. It has the question, what the goal is, and then it gives you a bad, a good, and a great answer. which is actually what that YouTube link will do as well. They start with a question and they walk through the okay, I don't think they call it a bad, an okay, a better, and the best answer. So you can kind of see that. In my resources too, I like to give a little combination of things. Some people like to read, some like to do podcasts or to watch YouTube videos. So you'll notice that in the resources. Okay, so back to these best practices, okay? So here's an example. Tell me about the toughest decision you've had to make in the past 6 months, okay? So the goal to that is really we're evaluating the candidate's reasoning ability, problem solving, judgment, and maybe even your ability to take intelligent risks. So bad answer, and I love this because most of the bad answers are no answer. So no answer is basically, oh, I haven't had to make a tough decision in the last 6 months. You've got to be kidding me. Everyone makes tough decisions, right? Regardless of your position, you've all made tough decisions. So obviously the no answer or that hasn't happened to me, take that one off the table as a candidate. A good answer is I made a difficult analytical or reasoning-based decision, for example, wading through reams of data to determine the best solution to a problem. Okay, I mean, it tells me a little bit that yes, you've tackled maybe a tough decision in the past 6 months. A great answer is maybe you made a difficult interpersonal decision, or better yet, difficult data-driven decision that included interpersonal considerations and ramifications. And then you start going into the details. And here's the resource, and here's what I did. So you really want to tell that story. Again, you're the salesperson, you're telling that story, and it should turn into a nice conversation, because as you give a little more detail, they're going to talk again and will tell me a little more about that. Or, oh, I've never had experience with that resource. You know, where did you learn about that? So that is one good example. I'll give you guys, so like I said, there's 9 in here. This is a good one. So, okay. Let's see here. So number 3, tell me about the last time a customer or coworker got upset with you. Okay, again, the goal here is to evaluate your interpersonal skills and your ability to deal with conflict, especially in a professional setting. So again, a bad answer is, oh, I've never had that happen to me, or you push the blame and responsibility onto somebody else. Okay, so they're looking for accountability here. A good answer is they focus on how they address and fix the problem and not who to blame. And the great answer is they admit they caused the other person to be upset, took responsibility, and worked to make a bad situation better. Great employees are willing to admit when they're wrong, take responsibility for fixing their mistakes, and learn from experience. So really remember, every mistake is really just training in disguise, right? It's that learning moment that we took from that. So those are kind of some examples. And again, we will have that out there as a link for you, so you can take a look at that either as a resource as a hiring manager or as a candidate. So this is where I want you guys to do a little prep. So those of you that are here as potential interviewers, so the potential hiring managers, maybe you own your own business, I would like you to develop a strong question, a good behavioral question that addresses the required and preferred competencies for the role and culture of your organization. And you want to be able to determine specifically with this question, leadership capabilities. Okay, so you know your organization, you know it would be required to think of a position in mind. Maybe it's one you're hiring for now. So take 3 minutes to write a good question to determine leadership capabilities. On the flip, I'm going to have the interviewee. Okay, so you obviously, when you go in and you're prepping and doing your work, you need to fully understand the required and preferred competencies. I mean, we're making up, a job right now. You need to know the company culture. You need to be prepared to discuss how your experience matches those qualities in detail. So I would like you, the potential candidates, to write a good answer to this question. Again, we'll take 3 minutes. Tell me about a goal you failed to achieve. And remember, we gave those examples. We know I've never had that happen to me isn't an option. So let's see if you can give me a good or a great answer on that question. And we will put 3 minutes on the timer. And we will come back, and I'm going to want to hear from all of you. All right. 3 minutes is in. So let's start with those hiring managers. The question was, you needed to write a good behavioral interview question based on your organization, and you're trying to determine leadership capabilities. Who wants to come off mute? Raise your hand. Camille.
Hi, good afternoon. The interview question that I came up with is, how do you motivate a disengaged employee?
Okay, so that is good, but what I would spin that on is, tell me in the past an example of when you've motivated a disengaged employee. But that's a great question. That's a good one. That's a good one. Good way to kick us off, Camille. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Next up, we need another hiring manager. Let us know what their question is. You guys get to learn off of Camille's now because I know you'll adjust it. Britt, got something
So
for
it
us?
looks like Mary Beth is.
Oh, Mary Beth, awesome. Thank you, Emily.
I don't know how to raise my hand in the other.
Just unmute and yell.
Okay, so my question is, give me an example of how you have introduced and implemented increased cultural competency in your organization.
Nice. That's a good one. That's a good one. You're going to have some good follow-up questions with that as well. So,
Right,
right?
right.
These are
Yeah,
deep-
I started out by saying, how have you conducted a cultural competency assessment? But that's really part of the answer.
Mhm.
You know, so that would be like the first step. You know, and if they didn't address that, you could follow up with, you know, did you do an assessment? Or how did you figure out people needed it? Or
Right.
something like that.
Right, and that's great. And Mary Beth, you bring up a really good point, because we have to be careful when we're asking the questions that we don't put the answer in there. I've seen a lot of hiring managers be like, well, here's what we value, or here's what we like to see. Now tell me what you've done.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
smart candidate is going to go, well, guess what? That's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary Beth. That was a great one. I think Lisa, did you raise your hand?
I did. I have, tell me a time you have, tell me how you handled the time a donor disagreed with your CEO's public position on a current event and threatened to pull funding.
That's going to be a good one. So what kind of answer do you think you're looking for in that?
Looking for how they have turned the conversation around and brought in the broader understanding of why the organization thinks that way.
Sure. Could you potentially have a candidate who maybe hasn't had that specific experience? Could they answer that hypothetically? Do you think that would be a good answer?
I don't know,
for
and it doesn't necessarily have to be CEO. It could be somebody, you know, somebody in a leadership role.
Okay, that might help a little bit, right, with the question, so it's not as specific.
Or a
because
board member or somebody.
somebody in authority, the decision
Mhm.
maker. Yeah. Oh, Mary Beth, raise hand.
Yeah, Lisa, I would be looking for somebody who would try and get at the assessment of what was important to that funder. You know, and rather than try and sell the school,
Mhm.
I would try and get at what's really important to that funder and how come they're upset about it.
Okay.
Instead of why. I wouldn't say, why are you so damn upset about this? You know, to pull your funding, I would say, how come that's an issue for you?
Great.
Like
Thank
that.
you.
I'd be looking for something like that.
That's good. Awesome. Thanks, Mary Beth.
Sure.
Let's see. Britt, I had as a hiring manager, so I think that's good. Britt had anything? If not, oh, I have a meeting to get to, but great meeting all of you. So that's Britt had to leave. So that's all. That's why we're not hearing from her. All right. So here are a couple other questions that I pulled offline. So tell me about the last time something significant didn't go according to plan at work. What was your role and what was the outcome? So there we're looking for thoughtful reflection and a strong sense of ownership, right? That's the definition of being a leader. How about describe a situation where you needed to persuade someone to see things your way? What steps did you take and what were the results? So you're kind of hearing that star in there, right? The results as that end thing. And then this is just kind of a simple one that everybody should have a story to. Tell me about a time when you led by example. What did you do and how did others react? So understanding how their behavior impacts those around them is really something you're looking for in the leadership. So there's a couple questions, but you guys had some really great specific ones. So let's turn to our candidates. So the question was, you need to answer, tell me about a goal you failed to achieve. Who's going to be my first brave one up on this one?
I can try to be brave.
All right, thank you, Thomas.
Tom is fine, but yeah.
Oh, Tom, okay.
It's all good. So disclaimer is that I'm a 5th and 6th grade orchestra teacher, so good times.
Good time, good time.
It's super. The answer is, the answer I came up with, and this is gonna hopefully not be overwhelmingly edu-speak, but when I completed my annual SLO, Student Learning Objective, students did not achieve the benchmark of 80%, achieving 80%. That is 80% of the student population scoring at least 80% on a note reading test. Unfortunately, only 71% scored 80% or better, which caused me to reflect on both the questions on the test, their relevance to 5th grade string curriculum, as well as the way in which I presented the test. Is it completely appropriate to give a written test only to students in a performance-based class?
All right, there you go. So when you kind of get that disclaimer in the beginning, remember the person who's interviewing you, you're speaking their language, so you're good. Yeah, so that's
Right,
awesome.
just for
They'll understand
all of
what
you.
that is. That's awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. And I'm sorry that happened.
It didn't, yeah.
Yeah. It's life as we know it now, right?
Educator
All right.
effectiveness is all of our favorite.
That's good to know, as I have 2 future teachers in my house, so they will learn that along the way, and they know they will learn from their failures along the way as well. All right, any other candidate want to tell me about a goal you failed to achieve? And thanks, Tom.
All right, I can speak to that.
Thank you.
Okay, I had been working for junior achievement. Okay, I'd been working for junior achievement, and everything that we were to accomplish, our goals that were set, all tied back to earning stars. So it was like a real goal-oriented and trying to earn these and beat out the other, competition. So what it was as a situation was that I had been falling behind in the number of programs being put into our school system. And I needed to have at least 360 classes by the end of the year. And I had a yin yang going on in which I had enough programming, but I did not have the funding to support the programming. So now my donor base I needed to raise at the same time. I had to meet 360 programs. So I also needed 360 volunteers to match all those hours. And most of the hours were at least 5 to 12 hours in a classroom per program. So you're looking at just an insane amount of time and money. And so I chose, instead of going backwards in my budget and irritating my volunteers, I chose to forego the star in programming, but meet my goal in fundraising. So therefore, I failed to get the star for programming that year. And what I learned from that was to prioritize earlier in the process.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So that's really part of this question too, is we want to hear that the interviewee set a huge goal and they didn't achieve it, but they took responsibility for it. It's all that accountability, right, that we've all learned. And if you have kids, you're teaching them about accountability, and it's what they're going to do different next time. And I think that was a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Any of our other candidates like to answer the tell me about a goal you failed to achieve? Rachel or Paige? I'm just super curious who's hiding behind therapy Zoom.
I have a question more on the, I guess, hiring manager side.
Okay.
I know I put candidate because I'm not normally a hiring manager, but I help to influence interview guides in my role. I'm a generalist, so I do a
Okay.
lot of different things, but
Oh, that's
Um,
great, Paige.
what was that?
I said that was great, Paige.
Oh, yeah. So the kind of behavioral question I put together was describe an opportunity you had to influence an outcome, specifically link your effort to any positive outcome. What was your role and what was the outcome? And I actually added what was your role and the outcome after you were speaking about that. So
Yeah, that's great. And that's really key in a lot of these questions too, is what was your role? Because sometimes on a resume, or they'll be like, I led this team, in this great, project that we did, this big transaction. And then when you start asking those questions, you find out you're like, well, like who set the agenda and who held people accountable? And you start asking those questions and you find out they were just a member on the team, which is fine to, just be a contributor. But you really want, if you're really looking for a leader, or if that's really what the job's going to be, you need to figure out really what their role was. So that's a great
right. I
point
liked
to
your
make.
earlier too, the reality versus the hypothesis, because I see that a lot where I have to circle back, like they're off on a tangent and I have to circle back and say, like, can you give me an example? Like
Mhm.
I need an example, because that really gets to the point rather than this swirl of, okay, I'm not really sure what your role was
Yeah.
or the outcome or the example you're trying to explain.
Yep, all the woulda, coulda, shouldas. Yep.
Yes.
That's another big tip that Paige reminds me, when you're in control of an interview, I would always start the beginning of it is, I'm going to ask you some questions, but we're going to keep this to an hour or whatever you had decided is. I may stop you at some point. Like I may interrupt you. You're kind of giving yourself permission and letting them know I may interrupt you, because we've all been in those ones, even just having conversations, right? That just ramble. And then you get to the end of that interview, it's an hour later and you've learned absolutely nothing about the person. So you have to give yourself that permission, excuse me, to interrupt them and say, okay, I got to reel you back in, or now I want you to go down this way, so you can really get to the heart of your answers. And then on the flip of that again is, as a candidate, keep your answers concise and to the point, so that they don't walk out at the end of the room and be like, wow, that was a great hour conversation. I learned some fun things about him and it was a fun talk, but I have no idea if they're qualified for this job. So remember to always stay concise. So thanks for sharing that, Paige. That's great. I think we got time for, sorry, allergies, one more. Any other potential candidate want to share anything with us?
I can go ahead and try to answer that.
Thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, so time I failed. So I work in higher education, academic advisor. So one of the goals that we have is we get students who have already applied, and now they're given to me to register for their classes and then successfully complete their first semesters. And then we have some numbers that we look at. We want at least 50% of those to finish, register for class and successfully complete the class. So there has been times when I failed to get those numbers. So in looking at why, first we kind of looked at the easy things, what would be some easy things to correct. So we individually took a look at each student and what was their circumstance and what was the communication that we used. Could we have done better here? Could we have done better there? What was my response? When they said my grandma died and I need some time, could I have offered more resources? We kind of looked at a lot of that stuff, but then we still thought, what, we're still not getting those numbers. Even if you account for some mistakes made in there, it still looks like we could still use some sort of different, maybe a larger process. So in taking a look at the process, called together a meeting to discuss with my colleagues, hey, let's brainstorm. Let's try to figure out a way we can turn more of these applicants into registered students and successful students for their semester. And one of the things that I had thought of is maybe that's just a very critical time to transition a student from applicant to register, and that's too stressful for them. Can we look at that and can we come up with some ideas so that it's not so stressful for them? Maybe we can have the admissions person work with them to get registered for their first class. and then maybe switch them over. Maybe that would be a good idea. So we just kind of like looked at some of those opportunities there, and we did have an opportunity to try some of these, and it did help our numbers a little bit. Probably not where we want, but we're still looking for, you know, some of those good answers. So I would say that's still in process.
Awesome, that's great. Heidi, I super went into like recruiter mode and I like started taking notes down. So it was like, that was great. So what I learned in that question, in that answer from Heidi, is really what's truly important to her as well. So I learned about, she was worried about the stress of others, right? So she's worried about others and the people who are her. I mean, those would really be your customers, right? Or your clients, or the students. Also that you appreciate your colleagues and that they have input. So that's teamwork and collaboration. You know how to use your resources. You didn't try to solve it yourself. You reached out to them and you gave yourself credit for having some improvement, but there's still another bar for you to have to jump. So as a hiring manager, I would hear all that, write all that down, maybe ask a couple more questions, but always in the back of our head, we're saying, how is that going to be a good fit for our organization? So obviously, if those are all things that I'm looking for, I learned a lot about Heidi and how she works in just that one answer. So
Great.
that was great. Thank you so much, Heidi, for that.
Thank you. Anything you thought I could improve on in there?
No, I mean, really, I think what you also, like I said, I was writing down the answers. So that was a really good, and it was concise enough. I would say it wasn't too long. But, and sometimes it's keywords and maybe knowing when you're applying for a certain position, if they have certain lingo or certain keywords to kind of weave those into it, because again, that's going to make them go, oh, she said collaboration. Oh, she said teamwork, whatever the words that they use,
Sure.
they're writing those notes down.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome. So that was good. Sorry I made you a couple of you work today. Carol got out because she was driving. By the way, we got a little note there. Therapy Zoom is actually Kelly Fisher. So now we know. I was just dying to know. She needed to take a work-related call, so she may jump back on. So awesome. So that was the best practices part of our agenda. So I would like to, in closing, I always want individuals to take action. So a couple things that I would suggest for that. I am, in my world, I'm a natural connector. I love to network with people and to connect with people. In my world as being an HR consultant, whenever I have one-on-ones or scoping meetings or introduction meetings, I always love to learn about their what. More importantly, I learn about their why. And I always end those conversations with, and how can I help you? And it may not be, I can be their HR consultant now, or maybe ever in the future. Maybe it's they need somebody. I just helped my neighbor connect with somebody to get her cabinets refinished. Okay. So it's those type of things. I know a lot of people. I'm very well connected on LinkedIn. So my first plan of action for you guys is to go out and connect with me on LinkedIn, if that is a space and a social media that you are using. That link will be in the follow-up email that Emily sends. The other is, obviously, I mean, we're talking with Mount Mary alum, right? And a friend of Mount Mary in Tom. So we want to have resources and we want to continue learning. So obviously I've got 25 plus years in this biz, and I am not even near knowing everything I need to know. And things are always changing, especially in the world of compliance. And when you're working with people, there's always something good. Having that behavioral science background, I will tell you, is huge in the HR world, knowing the psych and the soc of our people. Anthropology didn't help me out so much, but don't tell Sister Joanne that. So on that note, let's check out some of these resources I have for you. So one is this book. It's called Hiring. You guys can get the backwards version of it. So Hiring and Getting Hired, a performance-based hiring handbook. What's interesting about this book is he actually isn't a fan of behavioral interviews. His is performance-based process. So if you want to have another leg up on doing interviewing or being a candidate, check this out. So what he does is he takes that kind of behavioral interviewing to the next level. So it's a comprehensive option to interviewing and hiring. So it's a process. It's not just writing good interview questions. You're conducting a thorough job analysis. You're prepping a performance-based job description. That's very different than another. And then you really ask two questions. It's and with many fact-finding probe follow-up questions. So they call it the 2-question interview, but there's really a lot of others. So the 2 questions are, tell me about your most significant accomplishment. And then the second one is you actually describe a legitimate job-related problem, something that's very relevant to what you have going on at your organization, and you ask them how they would solve it. And then there's a lot of probing behind that. So again, this is about hiring and getting hired. So it's both sides. So it'll help you become a good candidate. It's also a cool resource for hiring managers. It's something I have used in my past corporate life. Again, like I said in there, I've got that YouTube link that Emily will send out that gives you the how to do a good, a better, and a best answer to a behavioral question. I know podcasts are like all the rage right now. I listen to a couple, but I do so much reading and stuff. I listen to the fun podcasts or the murder mystery ones, but I did get a recommendation for one. This is Women Who Open Doors. So what this is, it's a podcast. And here's the definition of it, where we discover how the lives of extraordinary women intersect and impact others to not only influence their careers, but their personal growth as well. Every episode promotes the gifts of these superb women and lets them shout out to others that have impacted their life as well. So I thought, coming from the Mount Mary world, that would be a good resource to you guys as well. And then, as we had talked later, the 9 most common behavioral interview questions from Inc.com will be included. So as we go into our closing here, I, of course, want to make sure I met everybody's objectives today, which you can see in that little pink square. So hopefully you now have an understanding of what the behavioral interviews are, the benefits of it, how to be prepared for them. And most importantly, with everything I do, I always want to make sure people are connecting and having fun. So if you guys didn't have that happen, please let me know so I can adjust these in the future. And then I want to end with, what questions do you have for me? We've got some love going for Sister Joanne in the chats, by the way.
I'll try a question, then I have to run. There are virtual 10-year-olds that need to play instruments in a few minutes. My question is just hopefully not super vague, and it's generalized, but I've interviewed quite a few times. Just my view of, the job market right now is keep your options open because it's insanely unpredictable right now. And so overall, it's kind of the same questions over and over and over. What would you do in this situation? Describe kind of your question from earlier, describe a room for area of growth, that sort of phrasing. And so my question in a general sense is an interviewer or is an HR person, sometimes I feel like the questions are kind of pigeonholing me into trying to sound like the Sunshine and Rainbows educator versus Tom Spitz. And other times I feel like I have to kind of be dangerous and actually act like myself. And so I'm just trying to get some real quick insight before I have to go. What exactly is an interviewer, or these days a Spark Hire one-way interview? What exactly are you looking for? Not you personally, but are you looking to get to know me, or are you looking to get to know someone who knows the right answers? Because sometimes it seems like a pretty blurry line.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's going to depend on the culture of the organization, Tom, right? And I always tell interviewers and interviewees to be genuine and be transparent to what we're doing. And then if I am your interviewer and I'm asking you questions, I do want to get to know you, because I want to know that you're going to be a good fit for our organization. You're going to balance out who we have and give us something maybe a little different. And you're going to be successful. And I need to know that you can be successful and what I need to give you to be successful. So my advice to you, Tom, is to stay yourself, be true to yourself, let them know who you are, because then the right people are going to make the offers to you. And again, you're in an academic world. I don't know if you're maybe trying to step out of the academic world. I'm not as familiar with how things run in an academic interview process, but in the business
Not
world,
really trying to step out, just knowing that, you know, there's very little safety net for, you know, when the budget tanks and those sorts of things. So just wanting to be on top of it all.
yeah, just stay true to yourself and you're going to find the right place and where you need to land. And I'm a true believer of everything happens for a reason and you'll end up in the right place, but be true to yourself so that they see that. And when they hire you, you know you're in the right place.
All right, thank you. Like I said, I have to run. I will try to find you on LinkedIn, and yeah, I'm not an alum, but my mother is and was a professor for a while. So thank you for letting me in.
Of course. Thanks, Tom. Have a great day.
Bye.
Anyone else have any questions for me?
I have a question. This is Lisa. I'm not going to turn my video back on. But you mentioned the BS interviewee somewhere along the line and watching for some red flags. And I've encountered these candidates and also their references along the way. And I'm just curious, you know, my big concern is sometimes how much can we probe and ask the person to drill into example. So just wondering if you have any suggestions when you've got someone in front of you that is just given just saying the right things, and you know that they're saying the right things. I mean, you can certainly end something, but or maybe you don't know they're saying the right things, but it just sounds so perfect. You know, just wondered if you have any suggestions.
Yeah, I think really just trying to push for more concrete examples. So maybe they have that one that they've really got down, like, oh, right, when I led this team and we raised $1 million for this funder, and they've got this really, you know, scripted thing. That's great. And then maybe go, you know, that's really great. Do you have another example?
Yeah.
Because they probably haven't planned a second one for you. So you can ask that. Like I said, that tell me more, that tell me more thing is always, tell me a little more about that, or kind of take them a little off script if it's feeling a little scriptish. And then you mentioned references, because we always joke with a lot of companies are like, why would I do a reference? They're not gonna give me somebody who's gonna, you know, speak ill of them. At that point, you just have to be asking the right questions about, like, here's what it is going to be in the job. Tell me how you think, you know, they're going to react in that situation. Like something very specific where they just can't give you the, oh yeah, they're great. Oh yeah, I'd hire them again. They're a thrill to work with. No, I want to know what did they do in this situation? And it could be a parallel question that you asked in the interview.
Yeah.
Without telling, to be like, oh, you know, did they ever have an opportunity to do X, Y, and Z, and see if they tell you the same thing that the candidate gave you in the interview with as much vigor and detail.
Oh, that's a great, thank you. That's great.
So that would be a good way to kind of double check on that. And then at the end of the day, Lisa, I always go by the 80-20 rule. It's my favorite. We're going to make 20% bad hires based on either us or somebody who's that professional interviewee. And that's just what we learn. We learn and we move on.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Are there questions that are important to ask as an interviewee? Absolutely. That was always, I kind of called it the death blow when I was interviewing, and I'd walk in, and do you have any questions for us? They're like, oh no, you did such a great job. I don't have any questions for you. I'm like, oh, come on, you have to have something. Rachel, I would think the big thing is to do your homework ahead of time, review the company, like check out their website, see if they've, you know, received awards, check out testimonials if any employees are saying anything about the company, and then be like, hey, I saw so-and-so said that. Is that something that's still going on? Is that still the environment and the culture of your organization? From my standpoint of a hiring interviewer, I am learning a lot from the candidate about what's important to them when they ask me those questions. So think about what is important to you and what you really need to know to make a decision to go spend every day, or 5 days a week, 40 hours a week for the next couple years of your life? What is important to you? And then ask them. I always love the question, why do you like to work here? Flip it on them. Why do you enjoy, you told me you've been here for 5 years. What's kept you here? What would make you leave? Like, what offer would make you leave if you got a phone call today? So that kind of gives you some insight into that. So hopefully that helps, Rachel.
Shelly,
does, thank you.
I was just going to say that. I said, I was going to say, if anything, just ask them why they enjoy working at the company. Because when people ask me that, and I know others, it's like, oh, you're interested in me and like why I like working here. So people love that question. So yes, I would totally agree with that.
Thanks, Paige. Anything else? Ooh, we're getting time management, Emily. Thumbs up on time management. We did good. Anybody else? If you think of anything else, like I said, connect with me. My email is in there. Anything else? Merry Monday. Hey, Merry Monday. Hey, Mary Beth, what's up?
Well, okay, I came because I haven't hired anybody in like 12 years because I'm retired, and I'm on a board that's hiring an executive director organization. And I'm just wondering if there's special things that you might think of to hire in asking questions of somebody who's really going to be the leader of a statewide organization.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that you're right. You're looking for leadership. You're looking for, and you're obviously looking for something above and beyond, right? These are people that go above and beyond. So, what have you done to go above and beyond your job description? I mean, I really like that question, going back to the Lou Adler about the hiring, getting hired. Ask them about their greatest accomplishment.
Sure.
That's really going to give you insight of what's important to them. And hopefully that matches the goals and the mission and the value of your organization.
Okay. Yeah. And in terms of references, I've never wanted to ask fewer than 3. And what's your rule of thumb?
Yeah, it's hard to get them, and I want them all professional, right? I don't want personal references.
Yes.
And I like that rule of 3 is nice, because then you try to get someone who worked with them as a peer, someone who worked for them, so you get to hear about their supervisory, and someone who they reported to. So then you get all different facets of it. Yeah, I like that rule as well, Mary Beth.
Yeah, okay. Good. Thank you.
Awesome. Good luck with your search.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a tough market. It's a candidate market, guys.
Yeah.
That and trying to buy a house or a boat right now too. Good luck with that.
Hey, Shelly, I have a question.
Yes, Rachel.
Kind of going off Mary Beth's question. So I'm an interviewee. So I am just finishing up my master's of OT. So I've only had really field work experience. So I've never, like supervised anyone, or I probably just use like my references as my 3 supervisors. Would that be all right? Or should I try to find someone that I like worked with, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think if you have a good peer that worked with you and saw your work ethic and how you dealt with different situations or any leadership, it's always good. Now, they may not call that person, but it gives them a nice option.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Thanks.
All right, we're down to the last minute, guys. Gals.
Shelly?
Yes.
Could you repeat the 3 types of references? You said someone that you worked with.
Yeah, so someone you worked with, so that would be your peer. Somebody who reported to you, so a subordinate, I don't like that word, but someone who reported to you. And then somebody you reported to, so a boss. So it's a boss, a peer, and someone who reported to you.
Thank you.
Okay, if no one else has any other questions, then I'm gonna just say thank you to Shelly. This has been great, and I am so appreciative of just your your flexibility and your grace today. So, and as Shelly said, I will be sending an email with all of her resources, so please watch for that this afternoon. And then this will also be later, the recording will be later available on our website. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. All right. I look forward to connecting with you all. Have a great day.